At my sister's wedding, she took the mic and made a cruel joke. My sister's a single mom, nobody wants her. The room burst into laughter. My mom, not missing a beat, added, "She's just a discarded item." The laughter quickly died down when the groom stood up, seized the mic, and the entire room fell into stunned silence. The valet took my car keys with barely concealed judgment. My 15-year-old Honda looked completely out of place among the line of luxury vehicles waiting outside the country club. I adjusted Jack's tie one more time, smoothing down his dark hair that insisted on sticking up despite the gel I'd borrowed from my neighbor. "Mom, you're making it worse," Jack whispered, but his smile told me he didn't mind. At 8 years old, he was more excited about wearing his first real suit than worried about fitting in. I wished I had his confidence. The massive oak doors opened to reveal a wedding that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors, and white roses climbed every available surface. Guests mingled in designer gowns and tailored suits, their laughter mixing with the string quartet's gentle melodies. I felt underdressed despite spending 3 hours getting ready and maxing out my credit card for this navy dress. "Wow, Mom, it's like a castle," Jack breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. A knot formed in my stomach as familiar faces turned our way. Aunt Margaret's eyes swept over my dress, the same one I'd worn to Jack's school graduation last month. Cousin Sarah's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against her champagne flute as she whispered something to her husband. Their expressions said everything I already knew. I didn't belong here. "Emma, darling." My mother's voice cut through the crowd like a blade wrapped in silk. She approached us with arms outstretched, her emerald gown flowing behind her. "You made it. And look at Jack, such a handsome young man." She hugged me briefly, her perfume overwhelming. Over her shoulder, I caught her glancing at my shoes, the same black pumps I'd worn to every important event for the past 3 years. The heel on the left one wobbled slightly, but Jack didn't notice. He was too busy staring at the ice sculpture of 2 swans that dominated the entrance hall. "The bride's room is just through there if you want to see Bella before the ceremony," Mom said, her tone suggesting I should want to do exactly that. I nodded, taking Jack's hand. We navigated through clusters of guests who parted just enough to let us pass. I caught fragments of conversations. Exotic honeymoon destinations, stock portfolios, country club memberships. None of it felt real to me. These people lived in a world where money wasn't counted twice before spending, where car payments weren't a monthly source of anxiety. "Grandma seems happy," Jack observed, swinging our joined hands. "She loves weddings," I replied, though what she really loved was the spectacle, the chance to show off the family's success. Bella's success, specifically. The bride's preparation room buzzed with activity. Bella sat in the center like a queen holding court, her wedding dress spread around her in perfect ivory waves. 3 bridesmaids fussed over her hair while a professional photographer captured every moment. She looked radiant, flawless, everything I'd never been. "Emma." Bella's face lit up when she saw us. "You look lovely." The compliment felt hollow, delivered with the same tone she'd used to praise my participation ribbons when we were kids. She'd always been the winner, the achiever, the daughter who made our parents proud. I'd learned to accept second place so long ago that I barely remembered wanting first. "You look absolutely stunning," I said, meaning it. Bella had always been beautiful, but today she glowed with the confidence of someone whose life was unfolding exactly as planned. Jack pressed closer to my side as the photographer's flash went off repeatedly. He wasn't used to this level of attention, this orchestrated perfection. Neither was I. "We should find our seats," I murmured after a few minutes of awkward small talk. The ceremony space took my breath away. White chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an altar draped in more flowers than I'd seen in one place. We were seated in the 3rd row, close enough to show we were family, far enough back to acknowledge our status within it. "Is that the groom?" Jack whispered, pointing to a tall man in a charcoal gray tuxedo adjusting his cufflinks near the altar. "That's Aiden," I confirmed. I'd met him only twice before. Once at the engagement party I'd barely afforded to attend, and once at a family dinner where I'd spent most of the evening helping Mom in the kitchen while everyone else socialized. He seemed decent enough, though I wondered what he saw in Bella beyond her obvious beauty. Maybe that was enough. Maybe some people were lucky enough to have beauty, money, and love all wrapped up in one perfect package. The ceremony began with all the expected elegance. Bella walked down the aisle like she was floating, Dad's arm steady beneath her hand. She'd always been graceful, in ballet class, at school presentations, even in casual conversation. I'd been the clumsy one, the awkward one, the one who tried too hard and still fell short. Jack sat quietly beside me, occasionally leaning over to ask whispered questions about the proceedings. His genuine curiosity reminded me why I was here, not for my family's approval, but to show him what family looked like even when it was complicated. During the vows, I found myself studying the guests around us. These were Bella's people now, Aiden's family, their college friends, professional colleagues. They represented the life she'd built, the success she'd earned. I felt proud of her and envious at the same time, a familiar combination that had defined our relationship since childhood. The photographer moved through the crowd like a ghost, capturing moments of joy and celebration. I instinctively turned away when his lens pointed in our direction. I didn't want to be the awkward relative in the corner of someone else's perfect memories. After the ceremony, during cocktail hour, the comparisons became unavoidable. Relatives asked about my job with polite interest that faded quickly when I mentioned managing a small medical office. They asked about Jack's father with carefully neutral expressions, then changed the subject when I gave my standard response about it being complicated. Jack found wonder in everything. The elaborate appetizers he'd never tasted, the live jazz trio, the way sunlight streamed through stained glass windows. His excitement was pure and uncomplicated, a reminder that not everything had to be measured against others' expectations. I watched Bella work the room with practiced ease, accepting congratulations and admiration like they were her natural due. She'd always known how to be the center of attention, how to make people feel charmed by her presence. I'd never learned that skill, never figured out how to be anything other than myself, which apparently wasn't quite enough for this family. The weight of their expectations pressed down on me like a heavy coat I couldn't remove. Every smile felt forced, every conversation felt like a test I was failing. But Jack's hand in mine kept me grounded, reminded me that I had something valuable even if it wasn't what this family valued. The clinking of silverware against crystal glasses cut through the dinner conversation like a dinner bell. I straightened in my chair, grateful for the distraction from Aunt Margaret's pointed questions about my plans for the future. Jack had just finished his second helping of wedding cake. Apparently the dessert course came before speeches at fancy receptions. Ladies and gentlemen, the wedding coordinator's voice boomed through the sound system, we'll now begin our evening toasts. I relaxed slightly. Speeches meant the formal part would soon be over. Maybe Jack and I could slip out during the dancing before anyone noticed we were gone. My feet already ached in these borrowed heels, and I'd caught enough sideways glances to last a lifetime. Marcus, the best man, stood first. He was Aiden's college roommate, tall, confident, the kind of man who commanded attention without trying. His speech was perfectly crafted, full of amusing anecdotes about Aiden's questionable fashion choices in college and his terrible cooking skills. The crowd laughed at all the right moments. Even Jack giggled when Marcus described Aiden burning water while attempting pasta. And then there was the time Aiden tried to impress a date by making reservations at 5 different restaurants, Marcus continued, just in case one fell through. Turns out he forgot to cancel 4 of them. More laughter rippled through the reception hall. I found myself smiling despite everything. These were the kinds of stories that made people real human. For a moment I could picture Aiden as more than just Bella's perfect husband, as someone who made mistakes, who tried too hard sometimes. The maid of honor followed with a tearful tribute to Bella's loyalty and beauty. She'd known Bella since high school, back when I was already working part-time jobs to help pay for Bella's dance classes. Those details didn't make it into the speech, of course. Instead, we heard about shopping trips to Paris and sorority adventures I'd never been part of. Jack started fidgeting with his napkin, folding it into increasingly complex shapes. The speeches were running long and his 8-year-old attention span was reaching its limit. I placed my hand over his, trying to keep him still without drawing attention. And now, Marcus announced, the bride would like to say a few words. My chest tightened with unexpected hope. Maybe Bella would mention our childhood, those quiet moments when we'd shared secrets and dreams. Maybe she'd acknowledge that despite everything we were still sisters. Maybe this was her chance to bridge the gap that had grown between us over the years. Bella rose gracefully, her dress catching the light from the chandeliers. She moved to the microphone with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. The room fell silent, everyone eager to hear what the beautiful bride had to say. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," she began, her voice warm and melodic. "This day wouldn't have been possible without the love and support of our families and friends." She paused, scanning the room with that practiced smile I'd seen 1,000 times. Her eyes found mine for just a moment, and I felt that familiar flutter of sisterly affection. Maybe she would surprise me. "I want to especially thank my big sister Emma for making the trip," Bella continued, her tone shifting to something that made my skin crawl. "She's such an inspiration to all of us single ladies, proving that you can still have a great time even when nobody wants to take you home." The words hit me before I could process them. A few guests chuckled nervously. Bella wasn't done. "Emma's taught us all so much about independence. She's a single mom, strong, resilient, and clearly so intimidating that no man dares to approach her." Her voice dripped with mock sweetness. Or maybe they just know better than to take on someone else's leftovers. The nervous chuckles erupted into full laughter. I felt my face burn as heads turned toward me. Some guests looked uncomfortable, but others seemed to find Bella's roast hilarious. My hands trembled in my lap. "Mom, what's she talking about?" Jack whispered, confusion clear in his voice. Before I could respond, my mother's voice rang out from the head table. "Oh, Bella, you're terrible," she called out, but she was laughing. "Emma's just a discarded item at this point. But she still cleans up nice, doesn't she?" The laughter grew louder. Someone at the back actually applauded. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of faces, all looking at me with pity, amusement, or outright mockery. The elegant reception hall suddenly felt like a coliseum, and I was the entertainment. Jack tugged at my sleeve, his small face scrunched with worry. "Mama, why are they laughing at you? What did Aunt Bella mean about leftovers?" My throat closed up completely. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't think. The sound of laughter seemed to echo off the marble floors and crystal fixtures, bouncing around the room until it was all I could hear. How could they do this to me? How could my own family turn my struggles into entertainment? Bella continued speaking, but her words became white noise. My vision blurred at the edges. I gripped Jack's hand tighter than I should have, using him as an anchor to keep from floating away completely. "I don't understand," Jack said louder now, his voice cutting through my paralysis. "Why did she say you were scary?" "You're not scary, Mama. You're the nicest person I know." His innocent defense of me was the final straw. Tears I'd been holding back all evening threatened to spill over. I blinked rapidly, refusing to give these people the satisfaction of seeing me break down completely. The applause that followed Bella's speech felt like thunder in my ears. She returned to her seat with a satisfied smile, accepting congratulations from nearby guests who told her how witty and charming she was. She turned my pain into her moment of triumph. "Mama," Jack whispered urgently, "can we go home now? I don't like it here anymore." Neither did I. Neither did I. I was halfway out of my chair, my purse clutched against my chest like armor, when the scraping of another chair stopped me cold. The sound cut through the lingering laughter and scattered applause. I turned, expecting to see another guest preparing to leave or perhaps someone heading to the bar. Instead, Aiden stood at the head table, his tall frame rigid with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. His jaw was set in a way that made the muscles in his neck visible, and his hands, those same hands that had just slipped a wedding ring onto my sister's finger, were clenched at his sides. The laughter died abruptly. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Even the catering staff, who had been quietly clearing dessert plates, froze in place. The entire reception hall fell into the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. "Aiden." Bella's voice was small, uncertain. She was still holding the microphone, but her grip had loosened. For the first time all evening she looked less than perfectly composed. He didn't answer her. His eyes were locked on mine from across the room, and in them I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine anger. Not the polite irritation of someone embarrassed by a social misstep, but deep, righteous fury that made my breath catch. Without breaking eye contact, he walked toward Bella with measured steps. Each footfall echoed in the crystalline silence. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, wine glasses frozen halfway to lips, forks abandoned over half-eaten cake. "Hey, I." His voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath. Bella blinked up at him, confusion flickering across her features. What? Instead of waiting for permission, Aiden gently but firmly took the microphone from her hands. She released it without protest, perhaps too stunned to resist. He adjusted the height with deliberate precision, testing the sound with a soft tap that amplified through the speakers. I need to say something, he began, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. I can't, he paused, seeming to gather himself. I won't pretend that what just happened was acceptable. A collective intake of breath swept through the guests. Uncle Robert shifted forward in his chair. Aunt Margaret's champagne flute clinked against her bracelet as her hand trembled slightly. At the head table, my mother's smile had completely disappeared. What you all just witnessed wasn't humor, Aiden continued, his gaze moving across the faces in the crowd before returning to me. It was cruelty. Pure and simple. Jack's small hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with incredible trust. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he sensed its importance. I squeezed back, drawing strength from his presence. Bella stood slowly, her wedding dress rustling like autumn leaves. Aiden, it was just what? He turned to face her fully for the first time since taking the microphone. Just a joke? Just harmless family teasing. His voice didn't rise, but somehow it became more powerful. You mocked your sister for being a single mother. You turned her struggles into entertainment. You made a room full of people laugh at her pain. The color drained from Bella's face. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Around the room, guests who had been chuckling moments before now studied their hands, their plates, anything but the unfolding drama. She came here today. Aiden's voice grew stronger, more passionate. She dressed up, she brought her son, she sat politely through dinner and speeches. She didn't ask for attention or sympathy or special treatment. She just wanted to be here for your wedding. I felt tears threatening again, but they were different now. Not tears of humiliation, but something deeper, more complicated. And you, he gestured toward the head table where my mother still sat, her emerald dress suddenly seeming garish under the chandelier light. You joined in. You called your own daughter a discarded item, and laughed about it. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For once in her life, she seemed at a complete loss for words. I've spent the past year listening to speeches about family values, Aiden continued, addressing the entire room now. About tradition, about loyalty, about the importance of blood ties. But if this is what your family values look like, if this is how you treat each other, then I want no part of it. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work. Through the tall windows, I could see the sun setting over the golf course, painting everything in shades of gold and orange that seemed almost violent against the stark white of the reception hall. Emma, Aiden's voice softened as he looked directly at me again. You deserve better than this. Your son deserves better than this. And I'm sorry, truly sorry, that it took me this long to say it. He set the microphone down on the nearest table with a gentle click that somehow sounded final. The gesture was small, but it felt monumental. Bella reached for his arm. Aiden, please, let's just. He stepped away from her touch, not roughly but definitively. I need some air. And then he walked out. Not the dramatic storm-off I might have expected, but a calm, purposeful exit that somehow carried more weight than any tantrum could have. The double doors closed behind him with a soft whisper, leaving the rest of us in deafening silence. For the first time in hours, maybe years, I felt something other than shame. It was small at first, just a tiny spark in my chest, but it was growing. Someone had stood up for me. Someone had seen the cruelty for what it was and refused to let it pass. I looked down at Jack, whose wide eyes were fixed on the doors where Aiden had disappeared. Is he in trouble, Mama? Jack whispered. I squeezed his hand tighter and stood up, my borrowed heels clicking against the marble floor as I found my footing. No, sweetheart, I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. He's not in trouble at all. Walking toward the exit with Jack's hand in mine, I could hear whispered conversations erupting behind us like wildfire. Phones were being pulled from purses and jacket pockets. The soft glow of screens illuminated faces that had moments before been frozen in shock. Did someone record that? I heard cousin Sarah ask her husband in an urgent whisper. Posted it already, he replied, his thumb scrolling rapidly across his phone. This is going everywhere. Jack looked up at me with concern as we pushed through the heavy oak doors into the cool evening air. Are we leaving, Mama? Yes, sweetheart. We're going home. The valet seemed surprised to see us so early, but he jogged toward the parking area without comment. While we waited, my own phone buzzed insistently in my clutch. Text messages from numbers I didn't recognize, notifications from social media platforms I barely used. The digital noise was overwhelming. The first message that caught my attention was from my old college roommate. Emma, is this you? Someone just sent me the most incredible video. My stomach dropped. Within 30 minutes of Aiden's speech, someone had uploaded it to every platform imaginable. The video was shaky, clearly shot on a phone by a guest trying to be discreet, but the audio was crystal clear. By the time Jack and I reached home, the video had been shared 3,000 times. By morning it was approaching 50,000. The comments were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This man is a hero, wrote someone from Australia. Standing up for family when her own family wouldn't. The way he defended her without making it about himself, that's real character, posted a woman from Texas. As a single mom myself, this made me cry. We need more people like him in the world. Each notification felt like a small validation I'd never known I needed. Strangers were seeing what my own family had failed to recognize, that I was worthy of respect, worthy of defense. But the attention came with complications. Reporters started calling. A local news station wanted to interview me. Someone had identified Bella from her wedding photos and was asking pointed questions about the family dynamics on her social media pages. Bella's response was swift but clumsy. She posted a video the next morning, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, her makeup flawless as always. She sat in what I recognized as her apartment's living room, the one she decorated with expensive furniture from magazines. I want to address what happened at my wedding yesterday, she began, her voice carrying that same practiced sweetness from her speech. What some people are calling cruel was actually just sibling humor. Emma and I have always teased each other. It's just how our family shows love. The comments on her video were brutal. Your humor humiliated your sister in front of her child. Watch the original video again. That wasn't love. That was meanness. The way your own mother joined in was disgusting. Bella disabled comments within hours, but screenshots had already circulated. Her carefully curated social media presence, built over years of perfect photos and inspirational quotes, was crumbling under scrutiny. 2 weeks after the wedding, Aiden called me directly. I stared at his name on my phone screen for 3 rings before answering. Emma, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the wedding planner's contact list. I don't mind, I said, though my heart was racing. How are you? I should be asking you that. I've seen some of the media attention. Are you okay? We talked for over an hour. Not about Bella, not about the wedding, but about real things. Jack's upcoming baseball season. Aiden's work as a civil engineer. The book club I'd recently joined. Normal conversations that felt extraordinary because someone was actually listening. These calls became regular. Every few days Aiden would check in. Sometimes Jack would grab the phone and tell Aiden about school or ask engineering questions that made me smile. Aiden always took his questions seriously, explaining concepts with patience I'd rarely seen from adults in Jack's life. He's really smart, Aiden told me after one of Jack's impromptu interrogations about bridge construction. You're raising an incredible kid. The compliment settled in my chest like warm honey. When was the last time someone had praised my parenting without adding a qualifier? Meanwhile, Bella's world was shifting in ways I witnessed through mutual family friends. Her engagement photos had been removed from her social media. She'd stopped posting altogether, actually. Aunt Margaret mentioned during an awkward phone call that Bella and Aiden were working through some issues. 3 months after the wedding, I ran into Bella at the grocery store. She looked smaller somehow, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she wasn't sleeping well. Emma, she said, her voice uncertain. How are you? I'm good, Bella. Really good. And I meant it. The constant knot of anxiety I'd carried for years had loosened. I was sleeping better, laughing more, finding joy in small moments that had previously been overshadowed by family expectations. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. About the wedding. I didn't think. You didn't think about how it would affect Jack, I finished for her. Or me. I know. She fidgeted with her car keys. People have been saying such horrible things about me online. About our family. Maybe they're not horrible, I said gently. Maybe they're just true. 6 months after the wedding, Aiden's name appeared on my phone again. This time his voice sounded different, lighter somehow but also tired. I wanted you to hear this from me, he said. Belle and I broke up. Officially ended the engagement yesterday. I sat down heavily on my couch processing the news. I'm sorry, I said automatically, though I wasn't sure I meant it. I'm not, he replied honestly. We've been over for months, really. Since the wedding. I kept trying to understand how someone could treat their family that way, could find cruelty funny. I realized I was trying to love someone who didn't exist. Or at least someone who wasn't real. The conversation that followed was longer, deeper. We talked about values, about the kind of people we wanted to be. About what we'd learned from the whole experience. Thank you, I said finally. For standing up for me. For seeing me. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like, he replied. Watching you handle everything with such grace, it changed something in me. As I hung up the phone that night, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. I no longer felt like I was waiting for permission to exist, for approval to take up space in the world. Aiden's intervention had given me something I'd never had before. Proof that I was worth defending. For the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely free. The freedom didn't come all at once. It arrived in small waves, each one washing away another layer of the person I thought I had to be. 3 months after Aiden's call about the breakup, I found myself standing in the doorway of a 2-bedroom apartment across town, holding Jack's hand as the realtor handed me the keys. It's perfect, Mama, Jack said, racing through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing off hardwood floors that had never heard my family's criticisms. Can I pick which room is mine? Absolutely, I laughed, watching him sprint toward the bedroom with the big window that faced the park. This place was ours. No inherited furniture loaded with memories, no family photos judging us from every wall. Just space to breathe and grow. The apartment wasn't fancy, but it was clean and bright, with a kitchen where Jack could do homework at the counter while I cooked dinner. The living room had built-in bookshelves that I planned to fill with stories we actually wanted to read. Most importantly, it felt like a place where laughter was welcome. Moving day arrived with unexpected help. My neighbor from the old apartment, Mrs. Chin, insisted on packing our kitchen while her teenage son helped load boxes. Even my supervisor from work showed up with her husband and a pickup truck, claiming she needed the exercise anyway. You know, she said while wrapping my coffee mugs in newspaper, I've watched you handle difficult patients and crazy insurance companies for 3 years. You've got more backbone than you realize. That comment stuck with me as we settled into our new routine. Jack thrived in his new school, making friends with the kind of ease I envied. I started taking evening walks around the neighborhood after he went to bed, something I'd never done before. The simple act of moving through the world alone without apology or explanation felt revolutionary. 6 months into our new life, my phone rang during one of these walks. My mother's name appeared on the screen, the first time she'd called since the wedding fallout. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Emma. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. I've been thinking about what happened. About what I said. I stopped walking, settling onto a bench under a street lamp. Okay. I was wrong, she continued, the words coming out rushed as if she was afraid she'd lose courage. I was so caught up in the moment, in the laughter, that I forgot you were my daughter. I forgot you have feelings. The apology wasn't perfect. It came months too late and still felt somewhat self-serving, but it was something. More importantly, I realized I didn't need it to feel whole anymore. I appreciate you calling, Mom, I said honestly. But I need you to understand that things can't go back to how they were. I won't accept being treated as less than anymore. I know, she whispered. I know that now. The conversation was brief, awkward in places, but it ended without anger. When I hung up, I didn't feel the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. Instead, I felt something like peace. Work became a different experience entirely. The confidence I'd found at home started seeping into my professional life. When Dr. Martinez asked who wanted to take on training the new medical assistants, my hand shot up before I could second-guess myself. Emma, that's a significant responsibility, he said, looking surprised. I can handle it, I replied, meeting his gaze directly. I'm good with people and I know this office inside and out. He smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he was seeing me clearly for the first time. You're absolutely right. The position is yours. Training new staff taught me things about myself I'd never recognized. I was patient but firm, encouraging but realistic. The young woman I mentored, Sarah, reminded me of myself years ago. Eager to please, quick to apologize for taking up space. You don't need to say sorry for asking questions, I told her one afternoon when she apologized for the third time in an hour. Your curiosity makes you better at this job. She looked at me with surprise, as if no one had ever given her permission to be curious before. In that moment, I understood how powerful it could be to see someone's worth when they couldn't see it themselves. Evenings with Jack became our sacred time. We cooked dinner together. Real meals, not just whatever was easiest. He'd tell me about his day while I listened without the constant background worry about family expectations or financial stress. The raise that came with my new responsibilities had lifted a weight I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. Mama, Jack said one evening while we were making homemade pizza, you seem different lately. Happier. Do I asked, though I knew he was right. Yeah. You laugh more. And you don't check your phone as much when you think I'm not looking. His observation was startlingly accurate. I had stopped seeking validation from social media, stopped refreshing my email obsessively, stopped waiting for other people to define my worth. A year after the wedding, I received an unexpected text from Aiden. I know this might be strange, but would you and Jack like to have dinner sometime? As friends. I miss our conversations. The dinner happened 2 weeks later at a family restaurant where Jack could order chicken fingers without judgment and Aiden could tell us about his latest bridge project. It felt natural, comfortable, like spending time with someone who genuinely enjoyed our company. You look different, Aiden observed while Jack was distracted by the arcade games near the entrance. Different how? Confident. Like you've settled into yourself. He was right. The woman who had walked into Bella's wedding searching for acceptance was gone. In her place stood someone who no longer needed external validation to feel worthy. As we said goodbye that night, Aiden hugged me. A real hug, warm and uncomplicated. Thank you, he said. For what? For showing me what authenticity looks like. That wedding was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it ended everything I thought I wanted. Driving home with Jack asleep in the back seat, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The humiliation at Bella's wedding had felt like an ending at the time, but it had actually been a beginning. Aiden's defense of me had given me permission to defend myself, to believe I was worth defending. The woman I'd become didn't need anyone's approval to exist, to take up space, to be exactly who she was. She was a mother who raised her child with love and intention. She was a professional who contributed meaningfully to her workplace. She was a person who deserved respect, kindness, and genuine connection. Most importantly, she was enough. Exactly as she was, without apology or explanation. That realization, more than any vindication or revenge, felt like true victory. If this story of courage and redemption touched your heart, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Aiden took the microphone and defended Emma with such powerful conviction. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
My name is Allison Parker. I'm 27, and I was still in my black funeral dress when Jessica ordered me to stay for a 16-hour shift. My dad's body wasn't even cold in the ground. Through my tears, I sorted files while she watched with satisfaction. Then I found it, the forgotten Blackwell contract worth $2 million on her desk. After years of her cruelty, karma had finally delivered the perfect revenge opportunity. Before I continue my story, I'm curious where you're watching from today. My dad always said the world feels smaller when we connect through shared experiences. If this resonates with you already, please hit that like button. It would have made my dad proud to know his daughter's story is bringing people together. When he taught me to stand up for myself, I never imagined it would lead to this workplace showdown. Subscribe to follow my journey of grief, betrayal, and ultimately, justice served in the most unexpected way. My father, Thomas Parker, was my rock, my mentor, and my biggest cheerleader. We had the kind of bond that many daughters dream of having with their fathers. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike, helped me with my science projects, and later guided me through career decisions with wisdom that came from his 30 years in corporate marketing. Dad had this infectious laugh that could fill a room and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. His favorite saying was, "Always do right by others, even when they don't do right by you." I tried to live by those words, even when it felt impossible. 8 months before that fateful day at the office, Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came suddenly after weeks of him dismissing stomach pain as just getting older. Mom called me at work that day, her voice breaking as she relayed the doctor's grim timeline. 6 months, maybe less. I remember sliding down the wall of the supply closet where I'd taken the call, my legs giving out beneath me. Our family had always been relatively close, though like most families, we had our complications. My mother Eleanor was the practical one, the stabilizing force who kept everything running when emotions threatened to derail us. She managed Dad's medical appointments, insurance paperwork, and somehow still maintained her part-time job teaching piano to neighborhood kids. My younger brother Nathan, who was 24 and just starting his career as an engineer, flew home from Chicago every other weekend during Dad's illness. He was quiet in his grief, channeling his emotions into practical help, fixing things around the house, driving Dad to treatments, researching experimental options. Then there was my older sister Melanie. At 32, she was an investment banker in Boston, always too busy, always with a reason why she couldn't make it home more often. Melanie and Dad had a complicated relationship. She'd always been driven to succeed, to prove herself, and somewhere along the way, their similar personalities had created friction rather than connection. During Dad's illness, she called regularly but visited rarely. When she did come home, the tension was palpable. I resented her for not being there more, for missing precious moments that none of us would ever get back. She works in a demanding field. Mom would defend her. Not everyone can take time off as easily as you can. That was another thing. My family never fully understood what I dealt with at Meridian Solutions. They saw a good salary, a prestigious company name, and assumed I had it made. They didn't see the daily battlefield I navigated under Jessica Harrison's management. I'd joined Meridian Solutions 4 years earlier, fresh out of college, with a marketing degree and big dreams. The company was known for its innovative digital marketing strategies and impressive client list. Landing the job felt like winning the lottery, a feeling that lasted approximately 2 weeks before I met Jessica. Jessica Harrison was 42, impeccably dressed, and had a reputation for delivering results that made the executive team overlook her methods. In public settings, client meetings, company gatherings, she was charming, articulate, and seemingly supportive of her team. But behind closed doors, she was a nightmare. "You're lucky to be here," she told me during our first one-on-one meeting. "There were 100 more qualified candidates than you. Don't make me regret taking a chance." I hadn't understood then that this was her standard introduction to new team members, establishing dominance, creating insecurity, setting the stage for the psychological warfare to come. I just nodded, determined to prove myself worthy of the opportunity. Over the next 4 years, I watched Jessica systematically break down confident professionals, take credit for others' work, and create an environment of fear and competition. Those who challenged her mysteriously found themselves sidelined from important projects or subjected to public criticism that chipped away at their professional reputation. One by one, talented colleagues either quit or were forced out, replaced by new hires who hadn't yet learned what they were in for. Through it all, I persevered. I needed the job, especially after Dad got sick and medical bills started piling up. Insurance covered most expenses, but the experimental treatments we pursued, the special dietary supplements, the comfortable recliner we bought so Dad could sleep downstairs when stairs became too difficult, these things added up quickly. My parents had some savings, but it wasn't enough. Nathan contributed what he could from his entry-level salary. Melanie sent money, substantial amounts, but rarely herself. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," Dad said during one of our late-night talks, when pain kept him awake and I sat beside his bed. "You've got grit. Don't let that woman steal your spirit." I promised him I wouldn't. But some days it felt like Jessica was winning that battle. The day Dad died was one of those days. Meridian Solutions presented itself as a forward-thinking marketing firm with an emphasis on work-life balance, innovation, and employee satisfaction. The website featured smiling staff members collaborating in bright, open workspaces. The reality couldn't have been more different, at least in the client acquisition department where Jessica reigned. The competitive atmosphere was cultivated deliberately, with Jessica pitting team members against each other for limited resources, recognition, and the few promotions that came available. Monthly performance metrics were publicly displayed, creating a fishbowl effect where everyone's successes and failures were visible to all. Jessica claimed this promoted healthy competition, but there was nothing healthy about the anxiety it generated. Jessica's rise to power had been swift and calculated. She'd started at Meridian just 7 years earlier, but quickly aligned herself with the right executives, particularly CEO Richard Warren. Their connection predated Meridian. They'd attended the same business school, though Richard had been 2 years ahead of her. This relationship gave Jessica an unspoken protection that made her virtually untouchable. Her management style was a masterclass in manipulation. She would lavish praise on team members in one meeting, then criticize the same work to others behind their backs. She maintained an inner circle of 3 or 4 employees who received preferential treatment, better assignments, flexible schedules, invitations to client dinners, while the rest of us scrambled for scraps of opportunity. The composition of this favored group shifted periodically, keeping everyone insecure about their standing. Never trust Jessica's smile, warned Taylor Wright, a fellow account executive who had been at Meridian for 6 years. The bigger the smile, the sharper the knife. I had seen enough evidence to know Taylor wasn't exaggerating. There was Diane from Creative Services, who questioned Jessica's approach to a major campaign during a team meeting. The next week, Diane was assigned to the smallest, least significant accounts, effectively sidelining her career. 6 months later, she was let go during a minor restructuring that somehow only affected employees who had crossed Jessica. Then there was Marcus, a brilliant strategist who had secured a major client Jessica had been pursuing unsuccessfully for months. Rather than celebrate the win, Jessica claimed Marcus had violated protocol by not involving her in final negotiations. He was placed on probation and eventually left for a competitor, his confidence shattered. Most of us who remained developed coping mechanisms. We documented everything in emails, built alliances with colleagues in other departments, and tried to make ourselves invaluable to key clients. But complaining to human resources was futile. The HR director, Patricia Novak, was professionally friendly with Jessica and seemed to share her view that workplace stress was simply the cost of success in a competitive industry. "We're not running a daycare," I overheard Patricia tell a tearful intern who had reported Jessica's bullying. "If you can't handle feedback, perhaps corporate marketing isn't for you." Despite this toxic environment, I was determined to succeed. I arrived early, stayed late, and produced work that even Jessica couldn't criticize openly. I built strong relationships with clients who specifically requested me for their projects. This created a shield of sorts. Jessica couldn't target me too obviously without risking client satisfaction, which was the one metric executives valued above all else. My biggest win had been securing the Henderson account, a regional retail chain looking to expand nationally. Jessica had been courting their marketing director for months with elaborate presentations and expensive lunches. What ultimately won them over was my straightforward analysis of their current marketing weaknesses and a practical roadmap for improvement. The client specifically requested that I lead their account, a victory that earned me temporary protection but permanent resentment from Jessica. "Congratulations," she said when the contract was signed, her smile tight. "Just remember, the higher you climb, the farther you fall. Don't get comfortable." The Henderson success increased Jessica's scrutiny of my work. She began requiring daily updates, questioning my decisions in front of clients, and assigning me additional responsibilities without removing existing ones. It was a calculated effort to make me fail through overwork and impossible standards. When Dad's condition worsened, this pressure became nearly unbearable. Jessica seemed to view my family crisis as an opportunity to prove her point that I couldn't handle the demands of the job. Each request for time off to take Dad to appointments was met with sighs and reminders of impending deadlines. Each day I spent at the hospital resulted in a pile of urgent tasks upon my return. Family emergencies don't mean client deadlines change, she reminded me constantly. The rest of the team shouldn't have to compensate for your personal situation. The team she referred to consisted largely of recent hires who were still trying to prove themselves and were afraid to appear sympathetic to someone who had fallen from favor. Even Taylor, who remained friendly, kept a professional distance during office hours, aware that being seen as my ally could make her Jessica's next target. As Dad's condition deteriorated, so did my standing at Meridian. Projects I had nurtured were reassigned to others. Client meetings were scheduled during times I had clearly marked as unavailable for medical appointments. My performance review, previously stellar, suddenly contained concerns about my commitment and reliability. Throughout this campaign of professional isolation, Jessica maintained plausible deniability. She expressed appropriate sympathy when others were present, sent a standard company flower arrangement when Dad entered hospice care, and publicly offered flexibility that never materialized in practice. Of course, family comes first, she told me in front of our team. We're all here to support you during this difficult time. Hours later, in a private email, the Henderson presentation deadline remains unchanged. Your personal circumstances don't alter client expectations. I was being pushed to breaking point, and Jessica knew it. What she didn't know was that I was my father's daughter, and he hadn't raised me to break easily. Dad's cancer journey began with what he dismissed as indigestion. Too much of your mother's spicy chili, he joked, popping antacids like candy. By the time severe pain drove him to the doctor, the cancer had already spread beyond the pancreas to his liver. The oncologist used words like aggressive and limited options in that sterile consultation room while Mom gripped my hand so tightly her wedding ring cut into my palm. The initial treatment plan was brutal but straightforward. Intensive chemotherapy to try to shrink the tumors, followed by potential surgical options if the response was good. Dad approached it with characteristic optimism. I've got too much living left to do, he insisted, creating a bucket list that included teaching Nathan to fly fish and seeing me put that horrible boss in her place someday. The first 3 months following diagnosis were a blur of hospital visits, medication schedules, and learning more medical terminology than I ever wanted to know. I took as much time off as I dared, using vacation days and the limited personal days Meridian provided. Jessica's response was predictable. Everyone has family issues, Allison, she said during a particularly difficult week when Dad had been hospitalized for an infection. I need to know if you can handle this job or if we should redistribute your accounts temporarily. The threat was clear. Temporarily at Meridian often became permanently. I assured her I could manage, which meant working from hospital waiting rooms, answering emails at 3 in the morning, and preparing presentations while Dad slept in his hospital bed beside me. Month 4 brought a glimmer of hope. The tumors had shrunk enough that surgery became an option. The procedure was risky but offered the possibility of extending Dad's prognosis from months to potentially years. We celebrated with a small family dinner the night before surgery, even Melanie flying in for the occasion. To second chances, Dad toasted, raising his glass of sparkling cider since alcohol was forbidden. The surgery lasted 11 hours. When the surgeon finally appeared in the waiting room, his expression told us everything before he spoke a word. They had found more extensive spread than imaging had shown. They had removed what they could, but it wasn't enough. Recovery would be difficult, and the remaining cancer would continue to grow. I needed a week off to help Mom get Dad settled at home with new care requirements. Jessica's response was a masterpiece of passive aggression. She approved the time off but assigned me the Westfield proposal, our biggest potential new client of the quarter, due the day I returned. The team will cover your regular duties, but we can't ask someone else to take on Westfield with such short notice, she explained in an email copy to the entire department. I'm sure you'll find time to work on it between your other responsibilities. I spent nights on the Westfield proposal while Dad slept fitfully down the hall. I researched competitors while helping mom change bedsheets after dad became violently ill from his medications. I practiced my presentation in whispers while sitting beside his bed during bad nights when pain kept him awake. When I delivered a flawless presentation upon my return, securing the Westfield account against significant competition, Jessica's only comment was, "The graphics could have been more innovative." Let's remember that for next time. As Dad moved into month 6, exceeding the initial prognosis, but declining steadily, the balance between work and family became increasingly impossible. I requested a reduced schedule, 30 hours instead of 50 plus, with proportional pay reduction. Jessica denied it, claiming client relationships would suffer. I asked about short-term family leave. She reminded me that I hadn't been at the company long enough to qualify for the full benefit, conveniently ignoring that I qualified for partial coverage. Dad noticed the toll it was taking. During a lucid afternoon when pain medication had provided rare clarity, he confronted me. "You look exhausted, Alley Cat," he said, using my childhood nickname. "Is that woman still making your life hell?" I tried to deflect, not wanting him to worry, but Dad had always been able to see through my brave faces. "Listen to me," he said, his once strong hand now frail as it gripped mine. "There are two kinds of people in this world, those who build others up and those who tear them down to feel bigger. Your Jessica is the second kind." "She's not worth quitting over, Dad," I said. "Not with all the medical bills." He shook his head. "I'm not saying quit. I'm saying stop giving her power over your spirit. People like that, they can take your job, your time, even your energy. But they only take your dignity if you hand it over." It was one of our last real conversations. The following week, he developed pneumonia, a common complication for cancer patients with weakened immune systems. His body, already fighting on too many fronts, couldn't mount another defense. I called Jessica on a Tuesday morning, my voice breaking as I explained that hospice had given Dad hours, maybe days. "I need to be with my family," I said. "I'm sorry about the Miller meeting, but Taylor has all the information. The Miller account specifically requested you," Jessica interrupted. "They're worth 6 figures annually, Allison. Surely you can come in for 3 hours. Your father won't know the difference." Those words burned something inside me. "My father's dying," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I will not be coming in today, tomorrow, or likely the rest of the week. I'll update you when I have more information." I hung up before she could respond, something I'd never done before. Dad died that night at 11:37 p.m., with Mom, Nathan, and me holding his hands. Melanie arrived 30 minutes too late, a delay she would blame on airline schedules, but that added another layer to her guilt and our complicated relationship. The next morning, I sent a brief email to Jessica and HR, informing them of Dad's passing and requesting the company's standard 3 days of bereavement leave. Jessica's reply came within minutes, expressing appropriate condolences and confirming the leave. Patricia from HR followed up with official paperwork and the company's standard sympathy message. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday, allowing out-of-town relatives to travel and giving the funeral home time for preparations. I spent those days in a fog, helping Mom with arrangements, accepting casseroles from neighbors, and trying to process the reality that Dad was gone. Friday night, as relatives gathered at our family home for a small dinner before the next day's service, my phone pinged with a text from Jessica. "I know tomorrow is difficult, but we have an emergency with the Blackwell proposal. Their CFO moved the deadline to Monday instead of Wednesday. I need you to come in after the service to finalize the numbers. Everyone else is unavailable. It shouldn't take more than a few hours." I stared at the message, unable to comprehend the audacity. The Blackwell contract, a potential $2 million deal, had been in development for months. The deadline had always been Wednesday. There was no emergency that couldn't be handled by Jessica herself or waited until Monday. But in my grief-stricken state, with financial worries about Mom's future weighing heavily, I couldn't summon the strength to fight. I texted back a simple, "Okay," and turned my phone off for the remainder of the evening, trying to be present with my family while dread built in my stomach about what awaited me after tomorrow's funeral. Saturday morning dawned with appropriate gloom, overcast skies, and a light drizzle that seemed to mirror our collective mood. I helped Mom with her makeup, applying foundation over skin made paler by sleepless nights. Nathan straightened his tie in silence, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. Melanie arrived at the house already dressed in an expensive black suit, her professional armor intact despite the redness around her eyes. The West Side Chapel was filled beyond capacity. Dad had been beloved in the community, a Little League coach, a volunteer at the food bank, and a friend who never hesitated to help with home repairs or lend his truck for moving day. Flower arrangements lined the walls, their sweet scent almost, but not quite masking the somber smell of wood polish and hushed grief. The service itself passed in a blur. The pastor spoke about Dad's generosity and faith. 3 of his oldest friends shared memories that made us laugh through tears. Nathan read a poem that had been one of Dad's favorites. When it was my turn to deliver the eulogy, I somehow found strength in remembering Dad's words about dignity. My father believed that how we treat others reveals our true character, I said, scanning the tear-streaked faces before me. He showed us that kindness isn't weakness, that integrity matters more than success, and that family is life's greatest treasure. The only surprise came during the open sharing time, when Melanie unexpectedly approached the podium. My sister, who carefully managed her public image and emotional displays, was visibly struggling to maintain composure. "I thought I had time," she began, her voice catching. "I thought career achievements would make my father proud, that success would justify my absences. I was wrong." She looked directly at Mom, then at me. "Dad knew what I'm only now learning, that no promotion, no bonus is worth missing the moments that matter with the people who matter." Her unexpected vulnerability cracked something in me. Perhaps there was more depth to my sister than I had acknowledged, more complexity to her choices and her pain. At the graveside service, I stood between Mom and Nathan, Melanie on Mom's other side. As they lowered Dad's casket, Mom squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, but the physical pain was almost welcome, something tangible to focus on besides the hole opening inside my chest. The reception afterward was held at our family home, filled with people sharing stories about Dad over sandwiches and coffee. I was in the kitchen, helping Aunt Linda arrange another tray of food, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Jessica again. "The Blackwell situation is more urgent than I thought. Can you come in now instead of later? We need at least 16 hours to recreate the financial projections." 16 hours. Not the few hours mentioned last night. And recreate. What had happened to the original projections? I stepped into the bathroom to call her. "Jessica, I'm at my father's funeral reception. What happened to the original Blackwell projections?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Server issue," she said dismissively. "The point is, they're gone, the meeting is Monday morning, and someone needs to rebuild them. Everyone else is unavailable." "Everyone?" I questioned. "Taylor? Marcus? You?" "Taylor's on vacation. Marcus has a family event he can't miss, and I have the charity gala tonight that's been planned for months. I can't rebuild the projections myself because I don't have your familiarity with the underlying data." Her voice hardened. "This is a $2 million contract, Allison. Are you really going to jeopardize it because you're feeling emotional? What would your father think about that kind of professional irresponsibility?" The manipulation was obvious, but effective. What would Dad think? He'd raised me to honor my commitments, to be reliable, to do the right thing even when it was difficult. But he'd also told me not to surrender my dignity. "I'll be there in an hour," I finally said, hating myself for giving in but seeing no alternative. "But Jessica, I want this noted in my file that I came in on bereavement leave during a family emergency." "Of course," she replied smoothly. "Your dedication will be recognized." I returned to the reception, pulled Mom aside, and explained the situation as diplomatically as possible. Her face fell, but she nodded with resignation. Your father would understand. Responsibility was everything to him. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, hugging her tightly. Nathan was less accepting. "That's complete bullshit, ally. They can't make you work today of all days." They're not making me, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. It's just a really important client. Surprisingly, it was Melanie who offered the most supportive response. I'll stay with Mom tonight, she said. Take my car, it has better headlights if you're driving home late. Then, with uncharacteristic hesitation, want me to come by later with food? 16 hours is a long time without breaks. Touched by her offer, I nodded. That would be great, actually. Thank you. I didn't have time to change out of my funeral clothes before heading to the office. The black dress and low heels that had carried me through Dad's service would now carry me through this professional ordeal. Fitting somehow. The Meridian Solutions building was eerily quiet when I arrived, most employees enjoying their Saturday with family and friends. I swiped my key card, the empty lobby echoing with my footsteps as I made my way to the elevator. Our department floor was dark except for the light spilling from Jessica's corner office. She glanced up when I entered, taking in my funeral attire with a flicker of something. Discomfort? Satisfaction? Before her professional mask settled back in place. The Blackwell files are on your desk. I've left notes about what needs to be recreated. I'll be leaving for the gala in 30 minutes, but I'll check in later tonight. I nodded mutely and went to my desk, finding a stack of folders and a yellow legal pad with Jessica's handwriting outlining the tasks ahead. As I began sorting through the materials, trying to focus through the fog of grief, Jessica appeared beside me. I really appreciate this, Allison. The executive team will hear about your dedication. She was dressed in an evening gown now, clearly ready for her charity event. I'll be back around midnight to check your progress. The promised 30 minutes stretched to 45 as Jessica made phone calls and finished her makeup. When she finally left, the silence of the empty office pressed in around me. I sat in my funeral dress, staring at spreadsheets and market analyses while memories of Dad kept breaking through my concentration. Dad teaching me to drive in an empty parking lot, patiently talking me through my anxiety. Dad cheering embarrassingly loud at my college graduation. Dad in his hospital bed, telling me not to let Jessica steal my spirit. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed between grief and responsibility, before I forced myself to start working. The financial projections were complex, requiring data from multiple sources and careful analysis to ensure accuracy. Under normal circumstances, this would be challenging but manageable. Today, each number seemed to swim before my eyes, requiring triple-checking for mistakes. Hours passed. The office grew darker as evening settled in. I switched on my desk lamp, creating a small pool of light in the otherwise dark space. At some point, my phone pinged with a text from Melanie. Coming by with food in 20. Need anything specific? Her arrival was a welcome interruption. She appeared in the doorway balancing a thermal bag and 2 coffees, looking incongruous in her expensive funeral suit against the utilitarian office backdrop. This place is creepy when it's empty, she commented, setting the food on my desk. How's it going? I gestured at the scattered papers and my laptop screen displaying complex financial models. Slowly. I keep losing focus. Melanie pulled up a chair beside me, opened the thermal bag to reveal containers of pasta from Dad's favorite Italian restaurant, and asked, "What are we working on exactly?" The "we" surprised me. Melanie had never shown interest in my work before, but her presence and the practical offer of help penetrated my exhaustion. I found myself explaining the Blackwell project, the missing projections, and the impossible deadline. "This is suspicious," Melanie said after hearing the full story. "Server issues don't usually target specific files, and backups exist for exactly this reason. Plus, 16 hours to recreate something that probably took weeks originally." I hadn't had the energy to question Jessica's explanation, but Melanie's skepticism awakened my own doubts. "You think she deleted them deliberately?" Melanie's expression hardened. "I think your boss saw an opportunity to make you suffer or fail, or both. Dad would call that bullying, plain and simple." Hearing Dad invoked stirred something in me. I straightened in my chair and reached for the container of pasta. "Well, I'm not going to fail. Help me understand these market penetration estimates." For the next 3 hours, Melanie stayed, using her financial expertise to help me rebuild complex models and verify assumptions. Her analytical mind caught errors I was too exhausted to notice, and her presence kept the grief at bay, if only temporarily. "I should have known you were dealing with this kind of toxic environment," she said as she prepared to leave around 11. "I was so caught up in my own career drama." "We've all been caught up in our own worlds," I admitted. "But you're here now." After she left, promising to check on Mom and return in the morning with breakfast, I continued working through the night. Jessica returned from her gala around midnight as promised, seeming surprised to find me still diligently working. "How's it coming along?" she asked, the slight slur in her words suggesting she'd enjoyed the open bar at her event. "I've rebuilt the core financial models and updated the market analysis," I reported, professional despite my exhaustion. "I should finish the executive summary and presentation by noon tomorrow." Jessica frowned. "The team arrives at 8 tomorrow for final review. It needs to be done by then." Another shifting deadline, another impossible expectation. I nodded mechanically, too tired to argue. "I need to grab some files from my office for review at home," she said, moving toward her corner office. "Keep up the good work." As Jessica disappeared into her office, I rose to stretch my legs and get water, my funeral heels long since discarded under my desk. Walking past the office kitchen, something caught my eye on the conference room table, a familiar blue folder with the Blackwell logo. Curious, I entered the conference room and opened the folder. Inside was a complete copy of the supposedly lost financial projections, presentation slides, and executive summary, all with my name listed as preparer, but with subtle changes that introduced errors into the calculations. My exhausted brain took several moments to process what I was seeing. These weren't accidentally deleted files. This was deliberate sabotage. Jessica had copied my work, introduced errors that would be discovered during the client presentation, and set me up to take the fall for a potential $2 million failure. The 16-hour shift wasn't about recreating lost work. It was about keeping me occupied while she executed her plan. I quickly took photos of the doctored documents with my phone, then returned them exactly as I'd found them. Back at my desk, I compared the sabotaged versions with what I was recreating. The differences were subtle but significant. Growth projections inflated just enough to seem aspirational rather than fraudulent, cost estimates lowered just enough to make the ROI more attractive. As I contemplated this discovery, Jessica emerged from her office carrying a leather portfolio. "I'm heading out. I expect the completed work in my inbox by 7 a.m. for review before the team arrives." "Of course," I replied, maintaining a neutral expression despite the anger and betrayal burning inside me. "Have a good night, Jessica." After she left, I sat motionless, staring at the evidence of her betrayal on my screen. Dad's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "People show you who they are. Believe them the first time." Jessica had shown me exactly who she was, someone willing to sabotage a colleague's career while they were literally at their father's funeral. The question now was, who was I going to be in response? I think about that moment often, sitting in my funeral dress in an empty office at 1 a.m, grief and exhaustion clouding my thoughts, facing a moral crossroads. Would Dad want me to fight back or rise above? Would he tell me to expose Jessica's scheme or protect my job by staying silent? I wish I could tell you I knew immediately what to do, but the truth is I spent hours wrestling with my options while continuing to work on the legitimate projections. It wasn't until I went to Jessica's office looking for additional reference materials that I found it, the final piece of the puzzle that would change everything. There on her desk, partially hidden under meeting agendas and coffee receipts, was the original Blackwell contract. Not a copy, but the signed original that should have been processed weeks ago to initialize the project. The signature date was nearly a month old, and attached post-it notes indicated Jessica had been sitting on it deliberately, creating the artificial deadline crisis. This wasn't just about sabotaging me anymore. This was about covering up her own serious negligence by creating a distraction. And suddenly, I knew exactly what Dad would want me to do. I'm sure you're wondering what happened next, how this all played out after my shocking discovery. Sometimes the moments that test us the most also reveal our true strength. Have you ever had a moment where someone's cruelty accidentally gave you the very tools to stand up to them? Share your thoughts in the comments about whether you'd have confronted Jessica immediately or planned a strategic response. While you think about that, let me continue with what happened after I found that forgotten contract. The Blackwell contract lay before me, its implications slowly crystallizing in my exhausted mind. I carefully examined every page, taking photos with my phone for documentation. The contract terms were standard for our industry: a 12-month engagement with quarterly performance reviews, confidentiality clauses, and detailed deliverables. What wasn't standard was the processing timeline. According to the attached email printouts, Jessica had received the signed contract 26 days ago. Company policy required all contracts to be processed within 3 business days of receipt. The contract should have been registered in our system, copies distributed to relevant departments, and work officially commenced weeks ago. Instead, Jessica had buried it under paperwork on her desk, creating an artificial crisis that conveniently coincided with my bereavement leave.
But why?
What did she gain by delaying a major contract, potentially jeopardizing a client relationship? The answer lay in the project assignment section. The original proposal, which I had helped develop, listed me as the lead account manager with Jessica as executive oversight. However, on the return contract, there was a handwritten note from Blackwell's CEO. We were particularly impressed with Allison Parker's presentation and analysis. We request that she serve as our primary contact throughout this engagement. Jessica had been sidelined in favor of me, and rather than process the contract and acknowledge this client preference, she had created circumstances to make me appear incompetent. The manufactured crisis, the deleted files, the doctored projections, all designed to demonstrate that I couldn't handle the responsibility Blackwell wanted to give me. I sat in Jessica's chair, surrounded by evidence of her sabotage, and felt an unexpected calm replace my earlier confusion. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a $2 million client relationship being jeopardized by one person's ego and vindictiveness. I needed advice from someone I could trust. Despite the late hour, now approaching 2 a.m., I texted Taylor. "Are you awake? Professional emergency. Need your counsel." Taylor, despite Jessica's claim that she was on vacation, responded almost immediately. "What's happening? Are you at the office?" I gave her a brief summary of the situation, asking if she could meet me early in the morning before the supposed 8 a.m. team review. She agreed without hesitation, suggesting 6:30 at the coffee shop across from our building. With that support secured, I turned back to the legitimate work of completing the accurate Blackwell projections. I worked through the night, fueled by a combination of righteous anger, grief-induced insomnia, and the half-dozen cups of coffee I'd consumed. By 5 a.m., I had completed a meticulous reconstruction of the financial models, market analysis, and presentation slides, all backed up to my personal email and a USB drive for security. I showered in the executive bathroom using the emergency toiletry kit I kept in my desk drawer, but had no choice but to put my funeral dress back on. Somehow, it seemed appropriate for what I was planning. Taylor was already waiting when I arrived at the coffee shop, concern evident in her expression as she took in my funeral attire and exhausted appearance. "You haven't been home since the funeral?" she asked, pushing a latte toward me. I shook my head, then methodically laid out everything I had discovered. The supposedly deleted files that were never actually lost, the deliberately sabotaged projections, the hidden contract with its delayed processing, and the client's specific request for me as their account manager. Taylor's expression shifted from concern to anger as she reviewed the photo evidence on my phone. "This is beyond toxic leadership. This is potentially fireable misconduct. If I had proper documentation and witnesses, maybe," I said. "But right now it's my word against hers, and she has Richard's ear." Taylor considered this. "So, what's your plan?" I sipped my latte, organizing my thoughts. I need to neutralize the immediate threat to the Blackwell relationship while gathering additional evidence of Jessica's pattern of behavior. I can't just accuse her without protection. The protection being? Making myself too valuable to fire, I replied. If I save the Blackwell contract while exposing Jessica's negligence in a way that protects the company's interests rather than attacking her personally, Richard and the board will have to listen. We spent the next hour developing a detailed strategy. Taylor agreed to be my witness and backup, confirming that she had never been informed about any vacation time allegedly scheduled during this critical period. We also identified other colleagues who might have experienced similar sabotage from Jessica and could potentially corroborate a pattern. There's still risk, Taylor warned. Jessica won't go down without a fight. I know, I acknowledged, but I keep thinking about what my dad would say. He always told me that bullies count on your fear and silence. They don't expect you to stand up and fight back with integrity. Taylor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your dad sounds like a wise man. I wish I could have met him. Me too, I said, throat tightening. He would have liked you. As 7:30 approached, we finalized our plan. I would send the legitimate, corrected projections to the entire executive team, including Richard, with an explanation of the situation that focused on the urgency of properly processing the contract rather than Jessica's misconduct. Taylor would arrive at the 8 a.m. meeting prepared to confirm the timeline and absence of any communication about her supposed vacation. Before leaving the coffee shop, I received an unexpected text from Melanie, coming to your office at 8 with breakfast as promised. Also, interesting connection, my firm has been advising Blackwell on their expansion. Small world. This new information added another dimension to our plan. Melanie's position at her investment banking firm gave her legitimate insight into Blackwell's financial situation that could support my projections if questioned. As I walked back to the office with Taylor, still in my funeral dress after more than 24 hours, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. Dad had taught me that integrity meant doing the right thing even when it was difficult, even when there was risk involved. Jessica had made a critical mistake in her campaign against me. She had forgotten that lesson my father instilled in me from childhood. Ready? Taylor asked as we approached the building. I nodded. No matter what happens next, I'm not surrendering my dignity again. We rode the elevator in supportive silence, both knowing that the next few hours would likely change the trajectory of my career at Meridian Solutions, for better or worse. As we stepped onto our floor, I saw that the lights were already on. Jessica had arrived early, no doubt to review the sabotage materials before the team meeting. I took a deep breath, straightened my funeral dress, and walked toward her office with the original Blackwell contract in hand. The time for submission and silence was over. Dad would be proud. Monday morning arrived with the strange clarity that sometimes follows complete exhaustion. After finally returning home Sunday afternoon, sleeping for 12 straight hours, and changing out of my funeral dress at last, I arrived at Meridian Solutions 30 minutes before the scheduled executive briefing on the Blackwell contract. I was professionally dressed, meticulously prepared, and absolutely resolved. The conference room gradually filled with the executive team, Richard Warren, our CEO, Patricia from HR, the heads of finance, operations, and creative, and several board members who had taken special interest in the Blackwell acquisition. Jessica arrived last, looking polished and confident as she distributed folders to everyone present. Before we begin, she announced, I want to acknowledge Allison's extraordinary commitment. Despite suffering a recent family loss, she worked through the weekend to reconstruct critical financial projections that were compromised in our server incident. The calculated praise made my skin crawl, but I maintained a neutral expression. Several executives offered condolences about my father, which I acknowledged with quiet thanks. Now, let's review the Blackwell opportunity, Jessica continued, directing everyone to open their folders. As you'll see in the executive summary, we're projecting first-year revenues of approximately $2.3 million with implementation costs of roughly $400,000, giving us an exceptional ROI for a new client relationship. Richard flipped through the pages, nodding approvingly. These growth projections are very optimistic. What's driving such strong performance expectations? Jessica launched into a detailed explanation of market penetration strategies and synergies with Blackwell's existing customer base. I waited, watching as several executives frowned slightly at specific figures, though none raised immediate concerns. When Jessica paused for questions, I saw my opening. "I'd like to address some discrepancies in the materials that have been distributed," I said calmly, making eye contact with Richard. Jessica's smile tightened. "Perhaps we should discuss any concerns privately after the meeting, Allison." "Actually, this directly impacts today's discussion," I continued, pulling out my own folders and handing them to the executive assistant for distribution. "The materials you're currently reviewing contain several critical errors in the financial projections that would significantly misrepresent our capabilities to the client." A murmur ran through the room as executives accepted my folders. Jessica's face flushed with anger barely concealed beneath her professional veneer. "Furthermore," I continued before she could interrupt, "I need to bring an urgent matter to the team's attention. The Blackwell contract was actually signed and returned to Meridian nearly 4 weeks ago, but has not yet been processed in our system." I placed the original contract on the table, turned to the signature page, with its month-old date clearly visible. I discovered this on Jessica's desk during my weekend work session. "The client is expecting implementation to have already begun according to the timeline specified in this document." Richard's expression darkened as he examined the contract. "Jessica, is this accurate? We've had a signed contract for 4 weeks without processing." Jessica's composure slipped momentarily before she recovered. There were some unusual clauses that needed legal review. I was waiting for their input before processing. "Our legal department confirmed they received no such request," I countered, sliding forward an email I had obtained that morning from our general counsel. "Additionally, the contract includes a specific client request that I serve as their primary account manager, which contradicts the staffing plan in the materials Jessica distributed today." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Jessica attempted to redirect the conversation back to the financial projections, suggesting that my emotional state following my father's death might have affected my work quality. That's when Taylor intervened, exactly as we had planned. "I've reviewed both sets of projections independently," she stated. "The versions Allison has provided align with our standard modeling practices and the preliminary work our team completed last month. The versions in Jessica's folders contain multiple anomalies that artificially inflate revenue expectations." Jessica's face contorted with fury. "This is absurd. Taylor was on vacation and couldn't have reviewed anything." "I never requested or was approved for vacation time," Taylor replied evenly. "That information is incorrect." As the meeting descended into uncomfortable tension, there was a knock at the conference room door. The receptionist entered, looking apologetic for the interruption. "I'm sorry, but there's a Melanie Parker here for Allison. She says she has information relevant to your Blackwell discussion." Richard looked at me questioningly. I explained, "Melanie is my sister. She works for Kingston Financial, which has been advising Blackwell on their expansion plans. She may have insight that could help clarify the situation." Richard nodded permission, and moments later Melanie entered, every inch the polished investment banker in her tailored suit. She apologized for the interruption, then succinctly explained that Kingston had developed financial projections for Blackwell's 5-year growth plan, which included assumptions about their marketing investment with Meridian. "The projections in this folder," she said, indicating Jessica's materials, "promise results that exceed even Blackwell's most optimistic internal forecasts by approximately 27%. Their CFO would immediately question these figures as unrealistic." The revelation landed like a bomb in the conference room. Richard turned to Jessica, his expression now openly suspicious. "Jessica, can you explain these discrepancies?" Jessica's response was a masterclass in deflection. She questioned Melanie's authority to access confidential Blackwell information, suggested I had manipulated the situation out of personal animosity, and finally claimed that any errors were the result of the IT system's failure rather than deliberate action. That's when Marcus, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, unexpectedly spoke up. "This isn't the first time files have mysteriously disappeared or been altered before important presentations." All eyes turned to him as he described his own experience of sabotage 6 months earlier. His statement opened the floodgates, with two other team members sharing similar stories of missing files, shifted deadlines, and altered documents that had previously been attributed to technical glitches or miscommunications. Patricia from HR shifted uncomfortably in her seat as the pattern became undeniable. Richard's expression grew increasingly grim as he realized the extent of the dysfunction within one of his most profitable departments. Jessica, sensing her position weakening, attempted one final defense. These accusations are coming from employees with performance issues who are trying to deflect responsibility for their own failures. Allison, in particular, has been increasingly unreliable due to her family situation. The comment crossed a line, and I could no longer maintain my professional detachment. "My father died 3 days ago," I said, my voice steady despite my emotion. I came to work directly from his funeral because I was told there was a crisis that only I could resolve. I discovered that crisis was manufactured through deliberate suppression of a signed contract and sabotage of work I had previously completed. I turned to Richard directly. "I'm not here to attack Jessica personally. I'm here because a $2 million client relationship is at risk due to mismanagement, and because I believe Meridian Solutions stands for better values than what has been demonstrated here." The room fell silent. Richard studied both sets of documents for several long moments before speaking. "We'll need to adjourn this meeting while I review these materials more thoroughly. Jessica, I'd like you to wait in my office. Allison, please stay here with the executive team to address any questions about the legitimate Blackwell projections." As Jessica left the room, her face a mask of controlled fury, I felt no triumph, only profound exhaustion and relief that the truth was finally emerging. For the next 2 hours, I answered detailed questions about the Blackwell contract, the timeline of events, and my recommendations for moving forward with the client relationship. By early afternoon, word came down that Jessica had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Richard called me into his office, where Patricia from HR was already waiting with a noticeably different demeanor than her previous dismissive attitude. "First, let me express my personal condolences about your father," Richard began. "The fact that you're even here today demonstrates extraordinary commitment." I nodded my thanks, too emotionally drained for words. "We've initiated a formal investigation into the issues raised today," he continued. "Based on preliminary findings, including the delayed contract processing and evidence of file manipulation, we've placed Jessica on immediate administrative leave. The investigation will likely take several weeks to complete as we review past incidents that may be connected." Patricia slid a document across the desk. "We'd like to offer you 3 weeks of paid bereavement leave, effective immediately. You've more than earned it, and it will give us time to stabilize the department situation." I stared at the document, torn between relief at the offered respite and concern about stepping away at such a critical juncture. "What about the Blackwell contract?" "They're expecting implementation to begin immediately." Richard smiled slightly. "Actually, I've already spoken with James Blackwell. He was quite concerned to learn about the contract delay, but expressed complete confidence in you. They're willing to adjust the timeline given the circumstances, on the condition that you remain their primary contact as originally requested." It was more than I had hoped for: acknowledgement of the truth, consequences for Jessica's actions, and protection for the client relationship I had worked so hard to build. I signed the bereavement leave document, feeling some of the weight lift from my shoulders. As I prepared to leave, gathering personal items from my desk, Taylor approached with a small smile. "Justice served, finally." "I couldn't have done it without you," I told her. "You risked your own position to back me up." She shrugged. "Your dad was right about standing up to bullies. Sometimes it just takes one person with the courage to speak first." Melanie was waiting in the lobby, having returned after providing her statement to HR. "Ready to go home?" she asked. As we walked to her car, she said something that caught me by surprise. "Dad would have been really proud today. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you protected others who had been hurt too." Tears that I had been holding back all day finally spilled over. I just wish he could have seen it. Melanie put her arm around my shoulders. "I think maybe he did.